Hi, everyone. This is Jason Burek of Wall Street for Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street for Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a first-time guest, but I followed his work for a number of years. He was actually one of the first Austrian School Economic people that I followed. Found him on the Daily Reckoning. He had a lot of satirical comedy. His articles were interesting. They're not the normal, dull, boring type of financial articles. That's Richard Doughty, a.k.a. the Mogambo Guru. So thank you for joining us on a Wall Street for Main Street podcast, Mogambo Guru.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you.
Now, Mogambo, how did you develop your writing style? Because it's so much different than a lot of the normal financial people. What inspired you to create the Mogambo Guru character?
Well, actually, it just kind of evolved. To tell you the truth, I gave up giving a damn about what anybody thought, and I just wrote, and if anybody wanted to read it, they could, and if they didn't, they didn't have to. And for some reason, people liked it. Like you. And thank you very much, Jason, Junior Mogambo Ranger Jason. And so that's how I started. And Daily Reckoning talked to me about it. They liked the way I wrote stupid stuff. And so I had a nice long association with them. That's kind of how it all worked out.
And you worked in regular finance for a while, too? You worked as a stockbroker and investment?
Yeah, I was a stockbroker for a while, and I wrote a newsletter for a while, and I was a day trader in SP 100 options for quite a few years until I lost my nerve. I finally got to the point where, this next bet I was required to make was so huge, I just couldn't bring myself to do it, and I just chickened out and quit. So that's enough of this day trading options for me.
That's interesting. And did you also work on Wall Street and have to deal with a lot of regular mainstream like Wall Street Keynesians and people like that?
No, I never did, actually. I was pretty much tangential to all of them. And, of course, when I started out, I thought they knew everything and they were going to tell me all kinds of wonderful things and news. But those guys don't know any more about anything than anybody else, and they're always talking their book. They want you to buy something, so they think that's the best thing going. And so pretty much I just went bumbled along and with Keynesian trying to get that down, and finally I ran across the Austrian School with economics in one lesson. And man, suddenly, as soon as I read that book, my eyes opened up and I saw economics clearly for what it was. It was the most astounding moment of my life when I ran into the Austrian School of Economics. I'm very thankful. Thank you.
Yeah, and the thing about Wall Street is, when they tell you to buy something, especially in public for free on CNBC or Bloomberg, it normally means they've already bought it, a year or 2 years ago, and they want to dump it on you. So
there's some of that going on too. Yeah, it wouldn't you? Look at the gold suppression going on. I mean, it's just the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department, because under the powers they've granted themselves under the Exchange Stabilization Act, are actually buying stocks and bonds and suppressing the price of gold and the price of silver, and they're keeping the price of stocks up and keeping the price of bonds up and keeping the price of houses up. I mean, it's an insane amount of. So talking about Wall Street being a bunch of crooks, they're pikers compared to what the Treasury and the Federal Reserve are doing these days. It's astonishing. It's unbelievable the amount of corruption what's going on in the monetary world with the government actually buying stocks and bonds. I mean, this is insane. It just goes, oh man, I'll tell you, I'm really perplexed.
Yeah, and it's not just the U.S. government, too. It's all these governments coordinating. Japan's been doing it. China's been doing it. I think a report came out that the Financial Times published with some other agency that did it, and there's over $29 trillion going into by sovereign wealth funds and global central banks going into so many different asset classes all over the globe to prop up asset markets. These markets are fantasy. They're not based on reality at all.
No, they're not anymore. But that's the end game of this whole Keynesian idea that you can borrow your way to prosperity. It reaches this point where there's no other option except for them to be as corrupt as possible. It's right next to giving money away to people, just sending people checks. They're actually doing that in many regards. Half the households in America receive a government check every month. What kind of an economy is that? This is insane. This is beyond insane. We no longer have free markets in capitalism in America. It's the government is making sure this goes on and on. You know, the funny thing, I was doing a crossword puzzle on Sunday, and one of the clues was a 4-letter word for the crossword puzzle, and the clue was a savings vehicle. Savings vehicles, 4 letters. It turns out they think IRAs are the same as savings, believe it or not. This is insane. IRAs are an investment. Your savings should be in cash or in gold or in the bank or somewhere. That's savings. So it's money. Hey, liquid, and anything in an IRA is not a savings account. It's an investment, and that's where all our money is anymore. The government has to keep these markets up because everybody's money is in the stock market all the time. The banks have borrowed it all because the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed, and now the banks could borrow all that money and gamble with it and loan it out and have a wonderful time, and all the money's gone. So the banks are really in a hurt, and so people's money and it's all in the stock market. Even the money you think you have on deposit in a checking account is swept every night into short-term treasury debt. So everything is in debt in equity markets. Everything, all your money is in debt and equity markets, except the part you have under your mattress and in your wallet. I mean, so they have to keep this thing going. They have to keep the stock market up. They have to keep the housing market up, and they have to keep the bond market up.
Yeah, that's very interesting points. Now, do you think the Keynesian endgame is fast approaching? Because Japan seems to be caught in a trap here where no one wants their bonds anymore. The only people who are buying the bonds are the Japanese central bank. It looks like the only way they can keep their everything from crashing there is to print more currency and buy their own bonds. It looks like the U.S. Federal Reserve, even though they've said they don't want to do what Japan's done, it looks like they've followed the Japanese blueprint, and many other countries seem to be doing the same Keynesian endgame. And then you also have in Europe negative interest rates, which is something, Keynesian economics professors talk about, well, we'll force those evil hoarders saving. We hate savers. We're going to force them to spend their money and, take out debt and go into credit card debt and things like that.
It isn't astonishing. It's actually unbelievable what's happening. But that is basically the end of the Keynesian game. The funny thing is that no one seems to realize that if this kind of thing could work, it would have worked sometime in history. There's been countless thousands of countries and governments who have borrowed themselves into debt, and they did everything they could possibly do to get out of it, and nothing ever worked. But here we are again. We're supposed to be so educated, so enlightened. We're in the 21st century. We know everything about everything, and here we are doing the same thing every other dirtbag government through history has done. We're basically printing money to try to bail ourselves out of debt, which is just going to drive up inflation. And that's my point of the whole thing. The whole point of economics is to make life better for people. You don't do that by increasing prices. And the prices of things have to go up because the money supply is going up. So poor people are going to continue to get very, very poor a lot faster than they have been poor. And so we're coming up to something very, very ugly when the price of food and the price of energy gets up so high that people can't afford to eat or stay warm. This is really bad news, bad news, bad news. And it's the same thing. It happened everywhere this has been tried. This is always the end game, and that's why I say buy silver and gold, because that is the other lesson of the last 2,500 years of history, which is basically the people that had silver and gold made out very well because it is the ultimate currency. The government can take your land away, they can take your business away, they can take your income away, they can take all kinds of things away, but silver and gold are small, portable, and you can get them out, and everybody resorts to it at the end. And I don't know why people aren't buying gold and silver these days. They should be buying that stuff hand over fist as fast as they can go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. People should be dollar cost averaging and buying gold and silver.
Very nicely done. Dollar cost averaging is exactly the right answer. Ding! You get a star in your report.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, Mogambo, that that the middle class, U.S. middle class, is basically intentionally being destroyed by a lot of the policies with high grinded, with what Lenin would say was the best way to destroy the bourgeoisie, the middle class, is high taxes and also inflation, that it's just becoming a lot tougher for small business and entrepreneurs outside of maybe Silicon Valley or the shale oil boom to create jobs.
Yes, it is very hard, but that's you spend a lot of money going way into debt for 30 or 40 years building up a gigantic government looking for something to do. And what they do is they come up with more regulations and more inspections and more problems in everybody's way, so all these federal and government bureaucrats can justify their phony baloney jobs. So we got the regulation hampering everybody. We got taxes. Government taxes about half of all income. You had a federal income tax, state taxes, property taxes, sales taxes. It just goes on and on. At the end of the game, about half your money goes into taxes. You just can't have that kind of a system. But it's not intentionally harming the middle class, but someone has to pay.
and the rich people and the very rich people, the high net worth people, they can move their capital. They can afford the hire accountants and tax lawyers and tax accountants that can, create special purpose vehicles or offshore fronts and things like that the people in the middle class can't afford. So the middle class ends up paying the taxes even if maybe the higher end income people were targeted in the first place.
Well, actually, there's no need for the government to actually collect any taxes. I think it's more of an anachronism in keeping the IRS, which employs millions of people, all told, with all the CPAs and accountants and whatnot.
And the police. The police are tax
that's
IRS
right.
collectors.
So the IRS is basically just kind of a wheel-spinning game. They can print all the money they want. They print much more as much per year as they collect in taxes. So there's really no point in taxes. They can just print it all up. The problem with printing money is it causes the prices of things to go up until you're destroyed by inflation and prices. And that is exactly what is going to happen to us, because that is exactly what happened to every other dirtbag country in history that tried this silly stuff. Spain. When they discovered the New World, all that gold flowed to Spain. Everything was fine for a long time, and then they collapsed into bankruptcy. Things just got so out of hand that nobody could afford anything, and the economy collapsed. It goes on and on and on. What do you think all these riots around the world? Food is becoming, energy is becoming expensive, and a lot of those people spend up to half their income on food and shelter per month, and more, 80%. So any rise in food causes a lot of misery. Fortunately, right now here in America, we spend a lot less than that as a percentage of our income. But it's going to happen to us too. It always happens. Prices have to go up. And sure enough, prices of stocks have gone up. Prices of bonds have gone up. Prices of houses have gone up. Prices of all kinds of things have gone up because the Federal Reserve has created all the money that made it possible. You can't have those kind of prices without the money to make it possible. And so, yes, prices are going to continue to go up because the government is continuing to print money.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a global inflation problem. The inflation rate, the way the dollar standard and the global economy is set up, especially after Bretton Woods, is that the dollar is propped up and U.S. consumers are propped up and the treasury market has been propped up by foreigners who trade with us. They do the hard work and produce a lot of goods, and we just send them dollars. So I don't think that's a sustainable economic system where a lot of Americans, bubis americanus, as Doug Casey likes to say, is you mentioned how much information and education is potentially out there on the internet, or Austrian School Economics is free on the Mises Institute or elsewhere, but people are not reading it. I think they're watching reality TV shows or sports, or they're spending so much time believing the mainstream news and the mainstream financial media and entertainment stuff that they're not educating themselves properly to what's really happening right now.
Well, that's the way it should be. You shouldn't have to worry about your government doing this kind of stuff, and spend your life having some fun and educating yourself and basically spending your time kind of more productive things. But the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, as the saying goes. And so there are people who are paying attention, and everyone's going to be paying attention sooner or later. Prices are not going to be disguised from anybody. You go down to buy some food, and it's a lot more expensive than it was last week, and next week it's going to be even more expensive than that. Things are going to basically come to a head, and everyone will suddenly be aware, we've got a problem, and they'll go round and round, and they'll do everything they can to try to save this thing, like they always have. The English tried this back in the 1700s when they were having one of their problems. They got Isaac Newton working on the problem, and he couldn't come up with anything. And I don't see anybody around today as smart as Isaac Newton. So I don't think
Isaac Newton put him back on the gold standard, right?
Oh,
because he couldn't.
Oh yeah, well, the gold standard won't solve our problems, but it'll keep us from having another one. That was the whole point of the gold standard, was to keep the money supply from expanding, and then prices could not get out of control very much. And they would come back to basically reflect the amount of money in the economy and the velocity of money, blah, blah, blah. So that was the whole point of the thing. So control the money supply, hold it steady, hold it constant, or just keeping up with the population growth at the most, and everything will be fine. But we didn't do that, did we, Jason?
No.
No, we did not. No, we're smart. And I blame the Supreme Court. They're the ones that let FDR get away with this crap. It wasn't for the Supreme Court. And who has turned away every challenge since then? So it's not just the original one, but all Supreme Courts since then have let this travesty go on. It says in the Constitution money shall only be silver and gold, and the Supreme Court says, no, it doesn't have to be. It can be paper. What a treachery from our own Supreme Court. So, yeah, we're screwed.
so endgame you don't see a smooth landing here. You see potential like either deflationary 2008 or worse, or potential hyperinflation and deflation for the endgame.
It's all going to be a deflation and a whole bunch of things, and a lot of people will lose a lot of money, and there's going to be inflation and a lot of other things, basically food and energy. So, it's going to be a collapse like it always has. There's never been a smooth landing. Never. In 2,500 years of thousands and thousands and thousands of governments around the world, all the way through time, not one of them has had a smooth landing over getting too far in debt. Someone's got to have to pay by losing everything. That's the whole point of it. Someone has to lose to make these debts. The economy is running somewhere about $16 trillion, $17 trillion, depending on how you measure it. But the total credit market debt outstanding is $60 trillion. We owe about 4 times as much as we make gross. So what kind of a soft landing can you possibly have out of that?
Yeah, I agree. I don't see a soft landing. So either we're going to have worsening stagflation up until a potential hyperinflation where inflationary expectations, velocity money increases, people won't hold their currency for anything, or it comes back to the U.S., or, we have a potential 2008 scenario where, they screw up and they allow another Lehman Brothers type event, which, by the way, Lehman Brothers was for market forces. In capitalism, you have to allow banks to fail. You just have to. You cannot save and bail out all these different firms. So either way, I think gold and silver are going to be the winners in all this over the long term. I mean, in the short term, they can do whatever they want to the paper prices. They can change the inflation statistics dozens of times. I think they've changed the inflation statistics 20 times since 1980. And did you hear what Paul Krugman recently said about anyone questioning the inflation statistics?
No, what?
He said that we're inflation truthers for questioning any government economic statistics, and especially the inflation statistics, and that also the only good Austrian school anyone should ever study is Sigmund Freud.
For a guy who is probably one of the worst economists in the world, he has been wrong about everything. He's never seen any crisis coming. I can't believe anybody is still listening to him. It's really weird. But he can go on and on. Asking the end game in places. What happens is the government look for a scapegoat. Someone's got to pay, and usually a war erupts. Then they could call on people's patriotism, and so you can steal a lot of money from a lot of people by appealing to their patriotism and supporting their country in a time of war. We got to go against these evil enemy people. So a war will come about. That usually does, and in our case, I'm absolutely sure, we're going to break out into a war with somebody, and then everybody's going to be at war with everybody else because it's so economically expedient. meant suddenly you have an excuse to deficit spend like crazy buying munitions and arms and all kinds of things and preparing yourself for a conflict with the enemy and appealing to people's patriotism some more. So that's what's basically going to happen. That's when gold and silver will really soar.
Yeah, and I think they also may try to go in the next 5 or 10 years into people's retirement accounts, so their 401ks, the IRAs. They're going to say, due to national security or a potential war or whatever, that we're going to ask for patriotism that all Americans sacrifice 5% or 10% of all their retirement account money into the Treasury market, when really, it's because the foreigners won't buy the Treasuries anymore, and it's not going to be the real reason. But unfortunately, I think that's going to happen, and that's why I think people should start considering taking the tax hit now, getting their money out of the retirement accounts, and maybe into gold or silver or other diversified investments.
And if they don't, they have no one to blame for them but themselves. This is the same thing that's happened for over 2,000 years. Why would it be any different this time? Nothing is different. There's still government. There's still taxes. There's still money. There's still debts. There's nothing new under the economic sun for 2,500 years, and suddenly, for the first time ever, we're not going to fall into that scenario. It defies credulity.
Now, let's talk about actually gold and silver. It seems to me that in terms of the supply and demand, and obviously you and me both agree that gold and silver is manipulated, but it seems to me the miners, the producers of the gold and silver, they can't survive at these prices. It just seems that this is not sustainable for gold or silver miners to produce metal. A lot of them are losing money at these prices. If prices go a little bit lower, they're going to shut down the mines. Do you think we're basically bottomed here?
I don't know what's going on. Something weird is going on, but it's the price of gold, thanks to the work of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, has proved over and over again that the price of gold is being manipulated down by the government, both because it would look bad if gold soared in price, so they have a vested interest in keeping the price of gold down, but also because they've leased out all the gold that the government has to keep the price down as part of the manipulation. So, as far as the miners go, that brings back the inflation argument. Gold selling for $1,300 an ounce. Why are they losing money unless prices have gone up so much? Which brings me back to the original argument to buy gold and silver because prices are going to go up. And here they are, the miners themselves are proving it. On the other hand, if you were the Chinese and you were trying to accumulate lots and lots of gold as they are, wouldn't you also want to accumulate the mines too? And what better way to buy the mines except to buy them at bargain prices? So there may be a lot of things going on that you don't know. I mean, this world is so corrupt. That's one of the lessons of long monetary booms. At the end of a long monetary boom, everything is so corrupt by this time. Everybody's wanted to get in on that free money coming out, and deals have been cut, and corners have been cut, and laws have been broken. Everybody knows where all the bodies are, but the amount of corruption is off the charts at the end of long monetary booms. And this has been going on for half of a century. So, I don't know, even 1/10 of 1/millionth of 1% of all the corruptions and deals and slimy things going on.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there's just so much going on behind the scenes that we may never find out, like who's buying the U.S. Treasuries in Belgium or the Caribbean.
Yeah. All kinds of things like that. And these people are desperate. They are literally desperate. They owe all that money, that $60 trillion in credit mark and debt, is owed by somebody. And we only make $16 trillion in gross income. Yeah, these people are desperate. They're going to do everything they can to try to get things market around.
I think you're being conservative there with that $60 trillion estimate. I've seen over $200 trillion estimates, when you add net present value for all the unfunded liabilities like Social
that's right.
Security.
But I'm talking about credit market debt.
Okay.
Stuff you can buy on the market, the stuff you can buy
okay.
and sell. As far as derivatives, I've seen estimates of the derivatives exposure up to over $2 quadrillion. The lowest estimate I've ever seen for the derivatives bubble is about $600 trillion.
Yeah, it's the numbers are mind-boggling. The numbers are, they're mind-boggling. I mean, $1 trillion didn't even exist a number of decades ago. So
yeah, it's really it's really hard to tell what is the total exposure because a lot of those derivative bets are offsetting other derivative bets, and so it's for all I know that at the end of the day, if they netted everything out, it would be exactly zero, and no one would lose or make any money. But the total amount of derivatives out there is so big. That leads me to believe that no, it will not net out at zero. Somebody's on the hook for all that and more.
Yeah, exactly. The banks talk about net exposure, but then the gross exposure is if one counterparty fails because that over-counter derivatives market's so opaque and it's a zero-sum game. If one counterparty fails, they all just fall like dominoes then.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, unless someone steps up and takes a really big hit. But then the Congress will slip around and have a tax credit or a tax deduction for that. I mean, the Congress is not going to sit there and let people lose billions and trillions of dollars. They're going to do something to try to bail them all out. Yeah, that's what they're there to do. That's what they're doing. That's what they have been doing. Why wouldn't they continue to do that? How about it? Remember that tax credit we had a few years ago? Everybody filed a tax return, got $600 or so. Why not $10,000? Everybody that filed a tax return gets $10,000. They can do it at the drop of a hat. It's as easy as pressing a button at the Federal Reserve. And to create all that money. So, yeah, they're going to do all kinds of weird things. It's going to get very strange from here on out.
Yeah, they don't even need a printing press anymore, Mogambo. They can just create it on a keyboard, digital dollars. They can just add an extra zero or two to your bank account, devalue the money that way if they can't get any other inflationary schemes because obviously there's inflation in the economy, but the Keynesians say there's not really that much inflation right now and they want more. They could come up with all kinds of new crazy schemes to try to get inflation. Ben Bernanke talked about some of these things during his helicopter speech in addition to buying stocks and things like that.
He's absolutely right. There's no limit. When you have a pure fiat currency and a Supreme Court that lets you get away with it and a Congress that is abetting you and wanting you to get away with it, no, there's no way to stop it. It's going to happen. They're going to create lots and lots more money, and that will end up creating higher and higher prices for food and energy, which is the part that kills everything. When the poor people can't afford food and energy anymore. There's no reason why a share of Apple stock can't be $1 billion. And why not? It doesn't do anybody any good. Well, why not? But when it comes down to a hamburger costing $1,000 and people don't have any money, that's a whole different thing altogether. And that's what the big problem is going to be. That's why the Founding Fathers wrote into the Constitution money shall only be silver and gold to keep the prices of food and energy for poor people from going up. Nobody cares about rich people. Rich people can afford to eat. Rich people can afford to heat their houses. Most middle-class people can afford to eat. Most middle-class people can afford to heat their house. So you let housing prices double, energy prices double, and food prices double, man, people are going to be starving in the streets, and there's a lot of poor people and very few rich people. So that's a lot of people in this country going to be in big trouble when food really starts rising out of hand, as it will, as it must, because they're creating the money.
Yeah, and they may try wage and price controls like what President Nixon did, and then historically also, Diocletian and Weimar Germany tried, I believe, wage and price controls too, but those didn't work, and they just created humongous shortages and made things even worse.
That's right. That's all you can do. You're not going to produce anything at a loss to you if you're a producer of anything, so you're just going to quit. So, yeah, that makes the prices go up because of scarcity problems, supply and demand. The dynamic makes prices go up because the supply falls so suddenly. People won't want to produce it at a loss. Yeah, there's no way out of this mess. There's no way out of this mess. That is the indelible lesson of thousands of years of economics. There's no good way to get out of it. Once you get in debt and start doing this kind of thing, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be a reckoning, as the Daily Reckoning would say. There's going to be a reckoning eventually, and there's no way, as von Mises says, to completely avoid pain because we've gone to fiat money, debt-based fiat money, which is being created in almost unlimited amounts. The credit boom is just being pumped into the system in subprime auto loans, student loans, things like this, and it's just making things worse and worse and worse. And it's basically, unfortunately, creating a lot of Americans that I think are basically turning into serfs.
Yeah, and thank you for quoting von Mises. And he's the guy that said that if you don't stop creating artificial booms, you're going to end up with the destruction of the economy or the currency or both. And that is exactly what's going to happen, and that's exactly what is happening. And you have Keynesians are holding sway. Krugman, who the hell would pay attention to Krugman? The guy has been wrong every time he opens his mouth, as far as I can tell, really. And yet they don't pay attention to the Austrians, who've been right the whole time. The Austrians have been right the whole time. The Austrian School of Economics has been 100% correct, and what they said was going to happen, it happened, and it's happening, and it's going to happen exactly the way they say. And yet nobody listens to them. They listen to Paul Krugman. What a world.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And the thing about Krugman, I think he's a paid shill. I think he's more like a politician. So no one ever questions his track record or his past predictions in the mainstream media. It's just he goes on there, and it's to quell, any people that are uprising. Oh, I found this thing about the Austrian school, and he asked it in his New York Times column. He's like, don't waste your time reading it or something like that. So he's just there, he's in charge of the propaganda ministry or something like that.
Well, it's also true that people who go against the mainstream thought get punished if things go wrong. If everybody is in a stock market and everybody follows what Krugman says and the whole thing collapses, then everybody can say, hey, I just did what everybody else did. Paul Krugman said to do this. How would I know? These losses can't be blamed on me. But if you go against that, start buying silver and gold, which will soar and make you very wealthy and all their clients very wealthy, they will still be blamed. They will be blamed. So you can't win by going against mainstream orthodoxy. And so that's what he's doing, too. He doesn't want to lose his job. What's he working at CUNY now, and does his columns for the New York Times.
I think he gets $250,000 speaking fees, too. He gets astronomical.
Yeah, he doesn't want to screw any of that up. He wants to make sure everybody is in the same boat and that he is the leader of this big boat, and it won't be his fault if we were all wrong. That's his attitude.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, there's just so much misinformation out there, but the Austrian School of Economics really woke me up when I found it in 2000, started fighting in 2007, 2008. Well, in wrapping up this interview, Mogambo, please tell our listeners where they can find your work, and you're involved in the video series now with Michael Maloney, too?
Well, actually, I was there for a while, but he went on to find more talented guys to help him out, and so I haven't done much of that lately, but I still write occasionally on MogamboGuru.com, and the #1 junior Mogambo Ranger put out a book called Mogambo Economica Mogambo, which is a bunch of my old columns that he thought were particularly good, and there's actually a second book being planned too, believe it or not.
Yeah, and for listeners out there, I strongly suggest if maybe the regular Austrian School Economics is too dense for you, the Mogambo Guru teaches Austrian School Economics in his own unique way, and there's humor and storytelling and things like that. It's a very refreshing, as you know, Richard, having to have read so many different financial things, they can get kind of repetitive.
Yes,
so
they can. Well, thank you very much for being so flattering to me. I appreciate it very much.
Okay. Well, thanks again for your time, and we'll try to have you on again soon to talk about gold and silver.
Thank you very much for having such a nice interview. You do very well, and you quoted Mises. Man, you're getting 2 gold stars this week.
Oh, yes. Very nice.
Bye-bye.